Okay, so we're going to take a look at 2016 question 9, which is titled Cash Budgeting. However, there's production budget in it as well. So part A requires us to produce a production budget for 4 months. So when you're doing this, you'll use the pre-ruled pages. So put in your heading production budget and set up your 4 months. I'm actually bringing it to 5 months because we need the sales figure from there as well. So pop in your sales in units first. So remember, all of this is in units. So the sales units from your question for July is 9,000, August 9,750, September 11,000, October 12,000, and I'm going to need the next figure here as well, so I'm just putting it into the next column, 12,500 units in November. So the next piece then is to calculate the units of closing stock that I have to maintain. So I'm told that stock of finished goods are maintained at 60% of the following month's sales requirements. So I need to get 60% of the following month's sales. So I'm just putting in a little workings note here. Now you do this on a separate page, but just to show you on the screen. So 60% of 9,750 works out then for July I have to maintain a stock of 5,850. So 5,850 is my closing stock there. And repeat the pattern, repeat the process. So 60% of 11,000 works out at 6,600. 60% of 12,000 works out at 7,200. 60% of 12,500 works out at 7,500. So those are my 4 months, and I can total then for the 4 months of July is 14,850. We have August at 16,350. September is 18,200. October is 19,500. So the next piece then is the opening stock, and it's a startup company, so there's no opening stock for July, and our opening stock for August is what we close with in July. So this figure 5,850 carries forward to the next month as our opening. So we'll be minusing that and so on. Repeat the pattern. Just bringing forward then the closing stock as our opening for the next month. And I am going to complete it there for November because I need the units figure in the next part. So just do the extra month there, November, in part A. So very simply then, your calculator will do the work here for you. Your total stock minus the opening stock will give you the units required. So you can run this on your calculator very quickly. So generally there are very little workings to show in this question. So part B of the question asks us to do a raw materials purchases budget, and you take the units of product that you need to produce from part A and carry it forward here into part B. So again, use your pre-ruled copy and set up your grid for the 4 months, July, August, September, October, and I'm using November as well because I'll need that figure later on when I come to the cost. So carry forward the units required to be produced and match those, and then you want to get the kg from the question here. It tells us that each unit requires 3 kg of material. So you're going to be multiplying each of these by 3. And again, that's just a quick calculator job. You get your multiplication. So I've multiplied up the units by the kg to give the total kg of raw material that I need to stock, and I also am told in the question that I have to maintain a minimum level of raw material stock. So to calculate that, we're told that it is 20% of the following month's requirement. So in other words, I'll just do first one here, and I'm showing it as a separate working just for your own learning purposes. So for July, the closing stock will be 31,500. So the next month's raw material by 20%. So for July, my closing stock will be 6,300. So again, you can do that on your calculator. You don't need to show your workings, and just repeat the process across. So 20% of 34,800 will work out at 6,960. 20% of 36,900 there will work out at 7,380. 20% of 38,040 works out at 7,608. And you're only asked to produce the budget for 4 months, but so we're finished here with the November line. So it was just to use this figure and get the 20% for October that we needed it for. So we're finished with the November line at that point. So that's your closing stock of raw material. So the next piece of the raw materials budget is to take out the opening stock. And again, because we're a start-up, there was no opening stock in July, and my opening stock for August was the closing for July. So the 6,300 closing here becomes my opening for August, and I'm going to be minusing that. And repeat the pattern then. So my closing in August, 6,960, is going to be taken out of the September figure, and we take that out because otherwise we would have accounted for it twice. So you've got to take out your closing stock. So your total kg plus your closing stock minus the opening stock gives you the raw material purchases required in kg or units, which is one of the pieces you're asked for. And now that we have the units, we can multiply by the cost per unit. So the price per kg here is €4, so you're multiplying each of these by 4. So again, just a very quick calculator job there, and you get your totals. So in units, or sorry, in euros, we have 203,400. We have 128,640. We have 140,880, and we have 148,512. So no need to show your workings there, simply do them on your calculator and slot them into your grid. And that is your raw materials purchase budget. So part C of this question looks for a cash budget for 4 months, July to October. And again, just follow the instructions on the question piece by piece. So the first item then is cash sales. This is our receipts. And cash sales, we're told, are 30% of the sales figures that are given. So July is 270,000 by 30%. So that's 81,000. And so on. So you don't need to show your workings on this, just do it on your calculator, repeat the pattern across, and you'll have the figures very quickly. So the next piece then are the credit sales, and again, follow the instruction. 70% of sales will be from credit customers. So for July, it'll be 70% of the 270,000, and 50% of that is 1 month's credit, and 50% is 2 months' credit. So So in other words, 270,000 by 70% by 50%, and that will give us back a sales figure for 1 month's credit of 94,500, and because it's 50-50, 2 months credit will be the same figure. Repeat the process then with the August figure, 292,500 by 70% by 50%, and that will go out to 1 month there into September at 102,375, and that's also my October 2 months figure because it's 50-50. And the October figure taken from September's sales of 330,000 by 70% by 50% works out at 115,500. And then simply going to total that. They are the only source of cash receipts, so you simply total across. So the next piece then are the payments, and the first item there will be purchases. And in this question there's just 1 month's credit for all purchases. Sometimes that's split into 1 month and 2 month lines of credit, so just double check your question. So very simply then, on our purchases side, we take the figure that we had from Part B for July, which was 203,400, and allowing 1 month's credit on that, it will be August when we pay for that, so 203,400. So that's coming from Part B. My July purchases figure from Part B is paid for in August. Remember, this is the cash budget. And you continue on your August figure from Part B with the September figure here, that was 108,640, and so on. Repeat the pattern across. The next item for payments is wages, and again just double check your instruction. Wages is 10,000 plus 5% of sales revenue per month. So you get your sales revenues and get 5% and add it on then to the 10,000, and it's payable as incurred. So my wages bill for July is my sales revenue for July from the question, 270,000 multiplied by the 5%, which is 13,500, and add on to the 10, so 23,500 there for July, and repeat the process across. So again, 5% of August added on to the 10,000 will give me wages there of 24,625. 5% of September sales, 5% of the 33,000 will work out at 16,500, plus the 10 is 26,500. And for October it works out at 28,000. That's my wages bill. The next piece are the variable overheads, and in this question it tells us that variable overheads are €4 per unit payable as incurred. So what are the units that we incur each month? Well, they're actually the units calculated back in Part A. So check back to Part A, and for July you'll see that we 14,850, and we're multiplying that by €4. So that works out then at 59,400, and so on. You go back to Part A, we've 10,500 for August multiplied by 4, and that works out at 42,000. Back to Part A again for September, and we have 46,400 when we multiply by 4, and for October we have 49,200. So just repeat the pattern across. The next piece are the fixed overheads, and the figure that we're given in the question includes depreciation, 28,000 per month payable as incurred. So we have to calculate the depreciation and take it out, because depreciation is a non-cash item and doesn't belong in a cash budget. So if we take a look at the next piece, we see that equipment is purchased in July. At the beginning of July, it costs 60,000 and it will have a useful life of 5 years. So if we take 60,000 divided by 5, and divide by 12 to get a monthly depreciation figure, we'll see that depreciation is actually €1,000 per month. So therefore my fixed overheads are 28,000 minus 1,000, or 27,000 per month. And that figure then doesn't change. 27,000 per month goes in across that line. The next piece then tells us that we purchased equipment for 60,000 in the 1st of July, so we can show that on the next line. So 60,000 goes in there, and we paid for that, financed it through a loan of 48,000 secured at 10% per annum. The loan and interest will be repaid over 4 years. Monthly capital and interest payments will commence in August. So we have 2 things to add in here: the loan repayment and also the interest. So we're not repaying in July, we only start the repayments out in August. We want to show those. So the loan repayment, first of all, is 48,000 over 4 years. So 48 divided by 4 and divided by 12 to get your monthly repayment figure. So that works out at 1,000 a month. So again, starting there in August at 1,000. And the interest is 48,000 at 10% per annum, so 4,800 divided by 12, and that will work out at 400 a month. And again, you can just do those on your calculators and pop in the figures into your grid. So the next thing you want to do then is just total your payments, and again run them on your calculator and you get your total payments. And once you have that, then you can do your net cash flow. And that's simply your receipts for the month minus your payments for the month. So in this case, 81,000 minus 169,900. So that's going to be a negative figure there of 88,900. So brackets or a minus sign to indicate that. And keep going to all your net together. So August, 182,250 minus 298,425 gives us a minus figure of 116,175, I should say, and so on across. In September, it's a positive figure of 65,935. And finally in October, it's a positive figure of 79,395. So that's the net cash flow. So the next piece after net cash flow is to show the receipt of the loan. And the loan amount in this case is 48,000. So that's simply a plus to our cash flow there of 48,000. That's all I have on that line. And then we want to show our opening and our closing, and you can do these 2 together. So in this question there was no actual opening cash, so I have 0 there, and then I can get my closing cash flow by simply taking the net, adding in the loan, and the opening. So when I put those together, then I still have a minus figure in this month, in July, of 40,900. My closing for July becomes my opening for August. So I carry up the minus there of 40,900. So I have a large minus figure then for August when I put those two together. And again, that becomes my opening for September, the next month. And again, net these two, and we have still a minus figure, and that carries forward to open for the next month. So these two lines you'll do together. So net cash flow plus the opening cash, and still at a minus overall here of 11,745, and those are all my closing cash figures, so I can double line then at that. So part D of the question requires us to produce a budgeted trading profit and loss account for the 4 months ending 31st of the 10th 2016. Just put in your title and start first of all then with your sales, and the sales figure for the 4 months comes from the question itself. So you simply add up your 4 months of sales there. So that comes to 1,252,500. So just remember that comes from the question itself. In this question we didn't have any opening stock, so I have 0 there. So the next piece I need then are my purchases, and to find the value of my purchases you need to go back to part B. So I'm just going to reference that there. So you simply total up the final figures from part B and the raw materials purchases budget, and then you should get from that 621,432. Okay, so the next piece then is our closing stock, and our closing stock is made up of 2 items. It's made up of finished goods and raw materials. So I've just left some space for that. So we need to get those figures. So to get my stock of finished goods, I have to go back to part A, and I see there that my October closing stock was 7,500, and I'm told in the question that the unit cost of finished goods is 20. So 7,500 by 20 will give you my closing stock value that I need for part D. So that works out then at 150,000. I also need to get the closing stock of raw materials, so I go back to part B for that. So October closing stock was 7608 there. 7608, and we are told that in the question there that is at €4 per unit at cost. So if I multiply that out, I will get my closing stock for part D on the raw materials. So that works out at 30,432. So these two together then will make up my closing stock for part D. So I've transferred in my finished goods valuation for closing stock for October, 150,000, and my raw materials valued at 30,432. So my closing stock in total is 180,432, which leaves me with a cost of sales of 441,000. And that then is subtracted from your sales to give you a gross profit in this case of 811,500. And then I'm on to the expenses for that period. So the expenses can be taken directly from Part C, and again simply total them up. So if we take wages for the 4 months, you simply add these three together and you get your total for wages, and so on with fixed and variable overheads. So the wages from Part C for the 4 months was 102,625. The variable overheads totaled for the 4 months at 197,000, and the fixed overhead. So that's just a quick calculation on your calculators. You don't need to show those workings again. So that's 108,000. Now the other items to watch out for, and it's not part of your cash budget, but you must include it here, is of course that depreciation that we calculated earlier at €1,000 per month. So 1,000 by 4 months is 4,000. Now other items you might see here, depending on the question, might be discount allowed to our customers. Sometimes there's a cash discount, so to include that. Or you might have a discount received as a gain that you can add on to your profits as well, so just to watch out for those. We didn't have any in this question, so that's all of our expenses, and that comes to 411,625 to be taken out of our gross profit. So that gives us a net profit here of 399,875. That's our profit before interest. And we know that we do have this interest on the loan, and again you get that figure for the 4 months. Interest on the loan comes to 1,200. In fact, it was for 3 months, because when we started paying it in August. So 1,200 there is coming out of our profits, to leave us with net profit then of 398,675. So that's my net profit. So part E of this question is just a little bit of theory, and it's asking you to make some recommendations based on the budgets that you've prepared. So if you glance back through your budgets and see what recommendations you could make, one of the things you could say here based on the production budget is that they could reduce the requirement for closing stock. 60% is quite high if you're simply carrying it over each month, and therefore that would have reduced your costs of materials. And you could also try and negotiate a better rate per kg. So maybe if you got it 3.5 or 3.75 to reduce your cost of raw materials, that would improve your budget. So just glance back through, and then on your cash budget, on your receipts and payments, again you might want to negotiate that more of your debtors would come in earlier, so negotiate better terms, try and get that money in quicker. And also maybe you could get some of your own suppliers giving you more credit as well, and that would help your cash flow. Always there's usually a point to be made around the purchase of equipment. Particularly if you're starting off, maybe renting or leasing equipment might be a better option and more manageable in the short term to medium term while you get established and build up your cash flow. So if you postponed the purchase of that or simply rented it, you wouldn't have this big outlay from the outset. So that might help with your cash flow. So write up your recommendations, and the last part of the theory here are the factors to consider when estimating future sales. And one of the factors you'll always consider when you're estimating future sales are the market trends. What is consumer thinking in terms of the product line, and that might require some market research. So market research, in other words, will give you some indication of how consumers are thinking about the products. You may also need to consider price factors. What you charge in order to remain competitive, and what are the costs likely to be, or will the costs be changing? Because that will influence your price obviously as well. Another factor to consider is always competition. If there is intense competition, that will put pressure on the price and also your market share. And just generally economic factors, things like Brexit, disposable incomes, employment levels will all influence the demand for your product. For your sales.